wanted to, for it. Okay, so what we have here is, let me zoom in a little bit, is the console. Now, this is something you, without setting up anything, you just need an account in Azure, and you can access it. It's called the Demo Logs Blade. It's really good to play with Gusto without actually spinning up your own tables and things like that. And I'm going to share it here in the attendee chat. Let me see where it is. And sort of like, dirty with the KQL. And then the one that we are actually going to work with is called you can actually search the table security. And then there is something called the security event. And this is the table that we're going to work with. So this is the way I actually recommend you to play with it is always have this take 10, because this actually is generating like this sort of like a demo environment, have almost 100,000 plus events in it. So you just don't want to choke your like a browser because it takes time to do back and forth data fetch. So I usually take like a take 10, just going to be limiting the output to the 10 items, or you can do 100 if you want to. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to just replace this real quick, and I will just do this. So this will actually going to return all the items from this table, and of course we are taking 10. Now another thing you can see is like limit 10. You can also do that. They're anonymous. They're basically synonymous. So I don't know the difference, but I will just use take. It just seems easy from plain English standpoint. Now typically the way you do it is you're going to have some where statement that we're talking about, right? Now, what you do is that you say where, and remember, like it has a lot of fields going on here. And if you wanted to focus where the account, let's say that you're looking into something related to the account with a SQL in it, because remember, if you work with Windows environment, server environments, on premises, when the events are generated, there is an account sign-in event. And then if the account has SQL in it, probably you wanted to say what's going on with this, because maybe there is some sort of like a lack of permissions there or some process created with this account you wanted to investigate. So you start with that. And when you run this, now it will only going to give us the account which have SQL in their name. So again, contains is an operator here that basically is sort of like anything within the string goes with it, right? So you're looking for the account. If you wanted to have like a specific, like, hey, I wanted to go and specifically look for a particular account, then you can also use equal, and then you're going to have that particular account here, which is fine. But in some cases, when you're starting up like figuring it out, you typically have either some hunch like what will be the name because you don't know. And then after that, you actually get to a point where you have equal. So you can do that. Now, the next thing what I'm going to do is I will show you how to actually do what I call like a distinct analysis, right? So you wanted to not just look for the events, you wanted to look for the events that actually, let me just hide this here. You wanted to look for events, the accounts which have admin, and you also want to look for the accounts which may have SQL in them. So there's an OR operator over here. This is very useful, right? So basically saying if there's an admin in the account name or the SQL, and I wanted to see the distinct account name, because right now what's happening is when you're running it, there are like duplicates, right? Because each entry is a perfect record. So it's basically coming up, but I'm not interested. I just wanted to see the distinct values, right? I don't need a summary. I just need a distinct, right? So I just want to see how many of these exist, right? So I'm taking 100 here, but in reality, there are only 27. So this is usually good to sort of like get just a view, like filter it up a little bit, right? So you usually start from sort of like that angle. And then the next thing you can do is that you can say, well, I wanted to look into accounts, but I also wanted to look into the accounts specifically in the 24 hours of the activity going on. So you basically have the time generated field. This is usually the field that exists in every single table that comes in, or there will be equivalent, because time generated is very important because you usually do a time constraint based on this field, right? And then we are basically saying the account is focusing on the user. So in this case, I'll just do this. Just a hint, if you want to run a specific piece of it, then you basically do this, highlight, and then you run, or you press like a shift enter. If you want to run everything, just select everything, or just put your cursor at the bottom and then you run. So this will basically going to give us all the user-based account activity. You see that it's exclusively focusing on the user, not the machine. Or you can do the other way around. I think you can do machine, and then it should give you the machine base. Hopefully this makes sense, right? I'm really keeping it basic, but something useful. Now what we're going to do, we're going to do a little bit more closer analysis for two of the events that we wanted to focus on. Now let's say 4672 and 4634, right? So let me just run this, and then you will see that I'm getting these, and these are two different type of events. So the event ID 72, and if I scroll down, it's basically saying that special privilege is assigned to a new logon, right? Now, for me, as a security analyst, I want to dig into that, right? So I say, okay, maybe this one, and then sort of like the other account event ID that is important is the 4634. But this is the one that I also want to look into. So this is some sort of like a privilege related assignment. So I'm interested in that. So you can do this. Now, if you just have one, then you can do equal. If you have a range, then you just do in. In is like it's like a for each kind of a thing. If you're familiar with C# or for loop, in simple terms, I think that's a better way of putting it. So we are constraining, right? Now we're sort of like filtering based on a range. Now, you can do a couple of other things, right? And I will quickly show you, is you basically, I will go here, and then I will say render, and you can do like a bar chart, and then you can say project. So you want to take a specific field. So you wanted to say the account, and you wanted to have time generated, and then you want to have an event ID. I'm just sort of like going with it. And then there will be this a bar chart, and then you have to also for charting it. Again, I'm not going to go in detail, but one thing you can do is that you can do something like this. And this is something we're going to use in the scenario. If we will summarize total, we have a count, and we will say, do this summarization based on the by account, and then it should be equal to by event ID. We wanted to have event ID here, and then we wanted to have time range, right? So we wanted to have time generated, and we wanted to do 1 hour, right? So, and we're going to do time chart. So let's do that. And I know this is like going into, so now what it's going to do, it's going to have like the event IDs, and then it will have sort of like what events are generated. Now, this is probably going to be a good fit for a bar because of the way it is, because the events are discrete. But for the scenario that we're going to look into, actually, let's get back to the scenario real quick. The scenario we are looking into is something that you will find more and more common in your sort of like a daily life as a security ops, right? So, for example, you find all the Windows logon events starting 2 weeks ago, like last 2 weeks, until a week ago, that occurred on a computer with the name start with an L. Now, this may be because of the alert that is generated that it's a computer, basically in an environment in a data center, which is basically, there's some logon events happening over there. This is the solution. I put it in the sort of like a slide, so you can sort of like read it. But I will just run it, and I will show you how it looks like. And what I'm going to do, I will actually keep this open here, the KQL. So try this one. Sharing can be sometimes very tricky. So here we go. And I will keep this open so we can play. So this one, right? Let me miss something here. So, okay. So this one, again, looking at a security event table, time generated, when you want to use a range, then you can actually do this. So 14 days, all the way to last week. Again, computer, it starts with app. It can also be contained. It starts with a slightly better readability, performance similar. So starting with app is basically saying that if starting the string match, right? So starting with the app, event ID is 462. This is what we are actually looking for, log on. And then we are basically doing the total based on the computer, right? And so here's the sort of like a way of summarizing it. And I'm using like a total descending just to capture it in a proper way. Like a descending, so highest should be first, but you can also do like a leave it will be ascending in that particular case. Or actually it's a random in this case, but you force it if you want to have ascending. There we go. So it's going to be lowest first, but usually you don't want lowest first, you want the highest first. So basically now you have that, right? So you basically now have a computer starting with the app in the name, because usually you have a naming convention, and then you're basically looking at the process created. So there's a scenario, right? The other is like how many times each process ran on a particular computer. So you basically have computers running a process, and you wanted to see how many times a particular like a process actually ran. Now this one actually allow you to do the summary operation again. And this time we're going to count the number of processes and then on computers that are running, right? So you're basically going to get this, right? So the on host is running on this computer, and this is the times it was initiated, right? So that's another way of looking into it, right? And charting is also important. So the charting can be something like, hey, I wanted to chart the rate of processes creation of all the domains. Going to count the number of processes and then on computers that are running, right? So you're basically going to get this, right? So the on host is running on this computer, and this is the times it was initiated, right? So that's another way of looking into it, right? And charting is also important. So the charting can be something like, hey, I wanted to chart the rate of processes creation of all the domain controllers. So domain controls are usually very safeguarded, and you don't necessarily want a lot of operations on them. So you wanted to see, sort of a rate at which the processes are getting created. And let's say the naming convention in our environment is DC, like DC for domain controllers, and then the event ID is 4688. Now event IDs are very well documented, so you can always find like what is the event ID associated with the process creation. And then if you're basically going to run this, and this will take a little bit time because it's basically going to capture the result and put it in the chat and sort of like a nice chart form. But you can see that if you wanted to just look at the numbers, right? You can see that on this particular controller at this time, 771 processes are created, and this is per hour. So what we are saying is that every hour on a particular domain controller, what is the sort of like a rate at which these are created. So at the peak is 750, 771, and at bottom is almost like 300, right? So sort of like a range going on. Okay, so I was talking about a lot, and I think I'm covering a lot. Let me take a pause here. Any questions? Well, it's essentially Microsoft. It's a cloud native solution that provides what they call SIEM and SOAR capabilities. So it's security, information, and event management. So basically you're capturing events and you're performing analysis. That's what we're doing. And then the orchestration, automation, and response. So automation and response essentially means that you have the data points, you have the alert. How do you respond? You wanted to automate that. So it basically gives you this whole 360 view how to do these things. So you basically collect the information from visibility, then you analyze using Gusto or Python for hunting. We'll talk about that in a minute. And then you investigate the incidents and you automate. Now, how do you automate? Depends. You can use the playbook, you can use a webhook, you can call third party, you can do a range of things. But the idea is that you're reacting to some particular event. So that's sort of like the starting point. Now, key features and components. This is something that at the very base level, you have a data connectors where basically the data is coming from. When we're running these sort of like queries, you see the security event table. That's basically if you have an agent installed on a VM, then it will basically start sending the data. But it can be an audit log, it can be a sign-in log, right? So you basically usually have some sort of connectors, or you basically have some like a third party, like this taxi, like a threat analysis or anomaly based portfolio that's sending you the information, and that comes into your Microsoft Sentinel environment. And then you work with basically the log. So this is the thing that we just talked about. Now, what you do after that, you have something called the workbooks. You can actually take these queries, especially the charts and the tables, and you can literally put them in a workbook, and they will just give you a visual form to it, right? They just basically give you a nice dashboard. That's what they are, literally. They are click through, so you can actually react to them just in terms of the features. But the idea really is that you kind of like giving a dashboard or the workbook based on a particular criteria. So, and finally, you can actually do the analytics. So again, the analytics is something that depends, like how do you perform the analysis. But you can go from a very basic queries that I was showing you all the way to super advanced using third-party intelligence sources, right? When you have the data connector. For some, you have to pay for. So it really depends on how you wanted to do the posture management. Okay, so a couple of questions around KQL for the dev environment. Okay, I will actually give you a link. I'm putting it in the attendee chat for the logs. I don't know if you guys can see it. Some of you can, and I've been told that attendee chat is available to everyone. So here is a link. I'm putting it in the comments because I don't know what's going on. Maybe if it sees the link, it probably do something to it. I don't know. Okay, can you see it? I just pasted it in the attendee chat. Yes, no? It's assuming it's right there. So I put the link in the chat. The other question, let me see, is there a quick review KQL course? Yes, there's a lot of resources out there, and I will give you one. And that is something, and again, I don't want it to overwhelm you. Just keep that in mind. I will give you a couple of resources here in the chat. And let me just find out real quick. Okay, so first is like, what do you call, like a cheat sheet? I think that's the word for it. It's not. Okay, so I'm not sure why some of you cannot see the chat, but I put it in the chat. But yeah, I will DM you the link. Whoever is asking the question about the link, I will DM you. So let me do that in a minute, okay? I'm not sure why you cannot see it in the chat. Oh, someone put it in there. It's interesting. As an instructor, I cannot put in, but someone else can. Thank you, whoever does that. There is actually this link, the PDF. So I'm sending you there. So this is the what I call like a KQL cheat sheet. It will give you sort of like a high level. If you wanted to go and actually become a little bit more aware around the KQL and Sentinel, I think there is this course. It's called the Ninja Training on Sentinel, and it has a full, like a deep dive into KQL. And I'm also putting that link in the chat. So hopefully it will go through. And I'm also going to DM you, okay? Whoever asked the question. Yeah, I'm not sure why the links are not going through. So that's something that maybe a producer can take a note of. But I'm sharing it. Yeah. Okay. I put it in the Q&A as a response to your DM. So you should have the link. And if you're not, please remind me and I will do it. It's actually a course on the Sentinel. It's a multi-hour thing just on Sentinel. Not like a bootcamp crash course, more like a full deep dive. And it has a full section on KQL, like a deep dive. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to take a quick route for the next like 10 minutes and actually walk you through the capabilities. And then I'll leave this slide deck for you to refer later, okay? Because I think the demo is much, much easier to do than just talking about it. And I think it's also a little bit intuitive for you to understand that way. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen. And as usual,